Hey everybody, before this episode begins, just want to remind you of two things. The first one is that this episode of Mages and Murderdads was recorded before the final cut came out, Disco Elysium, the final cut, which means that we are talking about a version of the game that doesn't exist anymore. So this is a really interesting kind of historical document. So, for example, if you play this game now and you feel that we come to some different conclusions or ideas or whatever than is in the game currently, well, that's because this was a slightly different version of the game. At the end of this season of Mages and Murderdads, we're going to have a whole episode dedicated to, us kind of playing it again and talking about it. So don't you worry. Stay along with us on the trip, and I think it's going to be worth your while. The second thing I want to say here really quickly is that in this episode, just like last episode, we continue to talk about Klaasje's story, which deals with sexual assault, and we talk about it a little bit more explicitly in this episode. So just wanted to give you those two things. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll let you get right to the show. Welcome back to Mages and Murderdads. I'm Cameron.
And I'm Danny.
And we're playing Disco Elysium. This is episode 68. It's our fourth episode on Disco Elysium. Just giving you a little heads up here at the top. If you like what you're about to hear in the future, if you like it, then you can go to patreon.com/rangetouch in order to support the show. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about conversations. Now, in the last episode...
we spent an hour and 40 minutes talking about two conversations.
I was about to say that I realized afterward, because, we were getting a little bit, not time panicked, but we, once we're getting near 2 hours, we start, trying to wrap it up a little bit. And there are a few times in that episode we were like, oh, I'm looking at the time. I don't know if we're going to be able to get into it. And after that was done... I sat down and I was like, oh yeah, we only really got through two conversations. We didn't get through very much.
Do you know what's happened, Cameron?
We are real-time, one-to-one, just replicating what happens when you play the game.
What's happened is there was a time when Mages and Murderdads was a tight 55.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. Just like, it was scientific. We could dip 3 hours of content into like the acid... etch bath and pull it up, and we just have a beautifully delineated 55. And, after Torment, Tides of Numenera, you've stumbled into many other different projects. Mm-hmm. And these projects tend to produce 5-hour-long podcast episodes, and you have lost in you the will to impose the tight 55.
Well, I've not lost the will. I just feel like we need the time. I feel like this is just like pure justification and like logicification where I'm like, well, but you need the time.
You need the time.
How else would we do it?
Well, I will say this, right? There's never been a moment in Mages and Murderdads up until now where we have spent an hour and 40 minutes, basically over half an hour on a single NPC's conversation story beat. That has not happened, right? Like maybe Ravel in Planescape Torment, we probably talked about that for 20 minutes or so, you think?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Probably.
And this was what gets to the question that I posed and really like added this entire like stumbling block in the middle of the episode when I talked about where does the game reside and is there some fundamental difference between the way this game operates and the other game operates. I do think that maybe the question isn't formulated right, correctly, accurately, but the fact that there is this fundamental difference in the way that we are approaching the podcast and the fact that we're like allotting, $1.45 for the episodes when the other ones were shorter, it points to something. It points to the way, it's a very different way that we're engaging with the game.
Yeah, I feel like that if we, here's an alternate universe, right? Mm-hmm. Here's an alternate universe in which every other episode of Mages and Murderdads is nearly 2 hours long. Mm-hmm. And that alternate universe is one in which we are both huge combat number nerds.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Where we're like, but... I was doing the math on Celestial Fury, right, and comparing it to a +2 Bastard Sword, and here's when it procs, and there's a world, right, where we could be heavily invested, theoretically, in the things that would balloon an episode up. Mm-hmm. I think it's possible.
So it's really just the difference here is that where we get our nerddom, where our nerddom resides, is with these story beats and the conversations and like the emotional valence of the conversations. And that's why...
Well, additionally, yes, I think so. And additionally, that, like... tell me an NPC in any of these other games that has emotional valence. You know what I mean, right?
Noober.
Like, even if we're not looking for it, you're right, 100% Noober. There's a Noober character in Fallout 3. It's like a little kid in Little Lamplight, and I forgot to mention it on the episode that Michael and I recorded, and it's gonna kill me forever. But Noober lives on. I just want to say that. But you know, there's some of that too, in the sense that like the game is providing a platform for thinking about these issues, where just these other games, in a broad sense, do, right? Like, I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in, like, big capital P plot in Baldur's Gate, but those things are not really coming out in, like, shades of gray, deeply complicated conversations.
They also aren't built on each other. These things, the institutions in Baldur's Gate are floating. They're unattached to other things. They're just kind of like, here's a structure over here, and it does have, like, a particular architecture, but it's not, its foundation isn't attached to the same surface that the foundations of the other ideas are, right? But, well, shall we catch the viewer listener up on like where we are in this moment?
Yeah, give us that old plot summary. Where
okay.
are we at so far? It'll be 2 words additional to the last time.
Okay, well, I've memorized the number of words last time used, so I will just do some mental math. Okay, those are the 2.
Okay.
We wake up. We are a cop with amnesia and a bad drug/drinking problem. We realize we are in a town called Martinet in the city of Revachol, with our temporary partner Kim Kitsuragi. We are here to solve a murder, despite the fact that we've lost our memory. The murder victim was hanging behind a hotel called the Whirling in Rags after, extracting him from the position and performing an autopsy. The 2 of us come to different conclusions. Danny, me, discovers a bullet wound in the victim's mouth, whereas Cameron discovers, is a little skeptical that the cause of death was in fact hanging and isn't willing to commit, but didn't discover the bullet wound. We
discovered a bunch of footprints.
Yes, Cameron discovers a bunch of footprints, and like something doesn't add up about the way in which this person who, appears to have high-tech armor was carried out there. We conduct a lot of interviews. We talk to the union boss. We talk to union boss Claire Everett, right?
Sure.
We talked to Joyce Messier, who is the negotiator sent by the Wild Pines Corporation to kind of figure out or to kind of solve this conflict between the union workers and the corporation. There's a big strike going on. The union's demanding, every worker a member of the board. We find out that there is that basically a bunch of mercenaries were sent down here as muscle. One of these mercenaries was accused of rape. And that mercenary, we are told, became a victim of like vigilante justice on behalf of a particular group of dock workers who were kind of the enforcers of the union. At the very end of the last episode, we talk about this big conversation that we have with the Hardy Boys, the aforementioned union enforcers. And Titus Hardy, kind of the titular leader of the Hardy Boys, eventually we are able to kind of like provoke enough emotion with him that he dismisses the union lawyer who is present, and he makes an admission that he makes several admissions. He talks about Klaasje, a woman staying at the hotel, that she was the victim, and we were just on the cusp of kind of talking about maybe some divergent experiences we were having in that conversation and kind of the conclusion of the conversation. What do you want to add here?
I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. This conversation is complicated.
The conversation between the 3 different entities, ourselves, and Titus and Klaasje, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean that. Like this and this. Like I think that the conversation with Titus is difficult, but I think the conversation between ourselves and Klaasje is difficult, and how those two things interact is difficult because there are several bottlenecks. And the thing that I discovered, I thought that I had the ace in the hole because I knew about the bullet, right? Mm-hmm. So I felt like I was so ahead of the curve. But it turns out that didn't like open doors for me, and I'm still in these two conversations. There were still these big bottlenecks behind rhetoric, logic, and volition. That because of the way my character is made, which is all brawn, all, dexterity, no intelligence, no intuition, I have a lot of difficulty overcoming. I have to imagine it's a very different experience with your character that is the opposite of my character, minus being a rock star plus being a racist.
And a latent fascist. Although
fascist.
It hasn't really had much opportunity to come out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Nationalist, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sometimes, I've hit one or two bottlenecks like that, and I think, like I said in the last episode, the way I play this game is I just sit on my skill points until something comes up. And I've, put one or two skill points occasionally in, I think I put something in Composure maybe last time. Something like that. So I've put one or two skill points in things that are not blue and purple skills, but not many. I've tried to not bottleneck myself. So last time we ended with basically we had all the information from Titus, and now we are going back up to Klaasje because we know, and this is something I was a little bit confused about at the end of last episode, so I just want to make it clear.
Yeah.
So at the end of the conversation with Titus, what I learned is that basically he's just fed up, and that's when he dismisses Elizabeth, the lawyer. Mm-hmm. And rhetoric allowed me to kind of lean on the crew, and Fat Angus, the guy we talked about last time, he breaks, and I kind of pull it apart, pull the kind of thing apart. And during that conversation, Titus told me that Klaasje is on the run from the moral intern.
So my character had the same thing where Fat Angus breaks down, and basically it's in response to me saying, well, did y'all shoot him? And Fat Angus is like, well, we didn't shoot him, anybody. He was shot when we found him, right?
Mm-hmm. And he said something equivalent to that to me. He says something to the effect of he had already been shot. Yeah. So we didn't kill him, right? So it's kind of like a reformulating of the same thing, but basically, as you were saying, there's a lot, last episode, there's a lot that happens in this conversation to bring all the disparate pieces of information together. This is what in narrative, design used to be called a pinch point. I don't know what it's called anymore. Mm-hmm. But the idea that there are multiple pathways, but when you get here, we are all in coherence with one another about what we know as a character.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we learn here. This is where I got the esprit de corps thing of the mortician or the morgue guy. But,
yes. And at that point, you're caught up with me, and I no longer have the ace in the hole, as it were. Mm-hmm. Right? So basically, before this point, you can kind of talk to Klaasje, right? Mm-hmm. Because Klaasje is the one that kind of refutes this narrative of Lely, the dead private military contractor, the fact that he raped her. And you mentioned how the way this dialogue from Klaasje is written, it's very much leaning into these kind of hazy lines around consent. And, I think that makes us both a little uncomfortable. I don't really know what fully to do with that, but...
she actually said, I was looking over my notes before we recorded today.
I think it's 89%.
There is something to that effect too. And then she also said, I wrote this down, the reason she's unwilling to go along with Titus's plan, kind of in my version of the game, because she, went along with it with you, is she says, quote, they'll have to get someone more ... rapeable. Right. So there's this kind of, she is, I don't know, not self-critical is not the right word, right? But is purposefully saying, I was part of a system of, I don't know, moral gray area here. And, no one is innocent within it, right?
Well, also, she also has lines, Klaasje, where basically when you're talking about the private military contractor and the recording that he had on the tape that was provided to us by Titus, where he talks about, he references these war crimes.
Yeah.
And when you talk to Klaasje about it, she says, hey, I think this is a quote, women are evil. If I had been in the same situation, like been given the same power, I would also be, I would be going soldier of fortune or whatever the term was that was used on the tape.
I definitely did not get those lines.
Yeah. One thing that I think that I'm getting from the conversations with Klaasje early on that you didn't get is my intuition about physical instrument. I'm able to look at her and be like, this is someone whose body is a weapon. There were. I was getting this. This is special forces. This is special training. There was something about the way that she moved, or like the way that her body looked, that I knew. So I picked up very early on that she had some kind of special training. And you just referenced that Titus talked about how she was on the run in some way, right?
Yeah, and the last thing, or not the last thing to say about Klaasje, because we have to talk about this conversation, but the kind of additional piece that I think it would be very easy. Sorry, to reformulate. I think it would be very easy to say that Klaasje is being written as this kind of like Katie Royfey, like the morning after kind of character of like, it's a very kind of culturally conservative argument around women and sex, which is that women after the fact choose whether they consented or not, right? And this is something that we hear from the right wing now, and it's something, like I'm saying, the morning after was published, I don't know, 25 years ago. No, longer than that, maybe. But so it's a long-running argument kind of in, conservative commentariat culture here, right? I don't think that that's what's being gone for, although I think that we can't miss that there are alliances between these two things. I think that what's being gone for is that Klaasje is being written as a film noir character, right? She is a woman who doesn't quite have control of herself, is on the run, right? She's desperate. She's looking for people to protect her. That's the whole thing, kind of. You get the implication that she is having sex with Titus, and that has to do with kind of going to ground for the winter, and hiding here from the moral intern. And like you're saying, right, the game, not in my game, but in your game, you're giving this narrative of the body as a weapon, right? She is a femme fatale, and the only thing that she has, is a passport that's buried somewhere or hidden in some water somewhere, and her body. And so I think the intent here, if we're going for intent and we're trying to think about intent of writing, is that she is being fit into a character type, that's long running in detective fiction and all kinds of things like that. But that's also kind of in this universe that Disco Elysium is putting together of, like, as you talked about last time, the 11-year-old on amphetamines,
Yes.
right? Like, when you run those two things into one another, you start coming out with some almost like realpolitik. That's just the way it is, bro. Sex is weird. It's confusing. Consent is weird.
That just so happens to have consonance with a lot of reactionary ideas.
Exactly, right. And so I think that, I don't know if it is the responsibility of art to like explain itself. I don't know if I necessarily think that, but I do think that, and this is something that we'll talk about with this episode too, that we've talked about, I guess, a few times, where it seems like the game is putting some kind of bumpers around ideas, right? Like when my character told the guy to speak Revacholian, Kim called me an idiot. When I entertain ideas about, her using sexuality or using this kind of ambiguity around sex to her benefit, there are no bumpers on that idea. The game doesn't call me an idiot. There are ways as a developer, as a creator, or as a writer that you can control for consonants of ideas, and we're seeing them deployed in some places in this game and not in others. And that is interesting.
Yeah, it seems like, and I wonder if this is because of Kim's identity, because Kim in a lot of ways is like the person that follows you around and provides some kind form of feedback, at least initially. And I haven't chosen very many like overtly sexist dialogue options, but I don't think Kim really pushes back on those if you go there.
Yeah, and there's something about, Kim kind of wandering around Jiminy Cricket like, and being your conscience a little bit. That's a little bit strange because you can get rid of Kim, and I'm interested in what happens when I have the conversation about, speak Revacholian, and Kim's not there to call me an idiot. I wonder about what that looks like. But anyway, I'm sorry. That was a long kind of thing.
I think a worthwhile discussion, but can I pitch an idea here? We haven't talked about this.
Yes.
I think that one of the reasons why it's difficult for us to tackle the conversational tree is that we get to different points at different times. So would you mind if I just give you my like an encapsulated, more or less fully formed, like how this dynamic works itself out, and I think a pretty good endpoint where we'll both meet, and then you can give me your version.
Absolutely.
Okay. Talk to Titus with the lawyer there. Eventually, I'm able to like press and like make Titus emotional enough that the lawyer leaves, right? And that's due to that dynamic with Fat Angus. And then Titus basically says, and this is after talking to Klaasje, it takes those me refuting the rape accusation, among other things, for him to get to this point, right? The lawyer leaves, and Titus gives me the story that, okay, we didn't kill him. What actually happened was Klaasje comes down, and he had been shot, right? So at that point, everybody, gets together and we like implement this plan to basically treat the corpse and make it look like he was hanged. You're able to talk to Klaasje, and she also gives this. The key point, though, is that there was another member of the Hardys, right? And that person is named Ruby. Yep. And that she was the person that initially Klaasje came down and told about the corpse, right? And apparently, according to Titus, she was the person that she thought on her feet and came up with this plan initially. And so I think that we both get to that point, right? So then this is where kind of the next step is, because Ruby is this person, the final member of the Hardy Boys, as it were. We need to talk to them because they are a key part of this. It seems like from the conversation, Ruby is the same person that is the truck driver, the person with the sanded down shoe, right?
It does seem that way.
It seems that way. So that's like what Kim and I are working on. And here are the 3 bottlenecks in my conversation. And one of these I don't even know about. So I'm curious to see if you overcame this. 1, there is 4 bottlenecks. 1, you can attempt visual calculus on a mirror to look at angles that the bullet could come through the mirror, because we know the bullet came through the mirror, smashed the mirror, had just been replaced, and went into Lely's mouth.
Wait, window.
It went through the, did I say mirror?
Yeah, you've been saying mirror. I'm just making sure that I'm not missing anything.
You're exactly right. It is window. So that's 1 bottleneck for the visual calculus. Second bottleneck is there is a volition check with Klaasje when you're talking to Klaasje, where basically my understanding is, because I've tried it and I've failed, is you have to overcome her beguiling nature. Because I've tried this check and it's been are you being beguiled? And it's oh no, right? So there's some your sexual attraction to Klaasje is clouding your ability to read her. Seems to be that check. There's a drama check with Klaasje that I do not understand whatsoever. And then the 4th check is a logic check with Titus, where you basically have to kind of present a theory to him as like that involves Ruby somehow as a suspect that would convince him to kind of help you locate her. Is this like an accurate picture of the game at this point?
I mean, what's interesting about all these is I'm assuming that I went through these, but I don't remember any of them as such, right? And I mean, that's, I guess, pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I think the reason why you could probably in the conversation go through them because you have these numbers high. I have 1 in all of these, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of scrubbing through to see where, I'm getting white checks or something like that here, but I don't even think that these are... I did have a drama check.
With Klaasje.
With Klaasje.
What
I have
was
a drama...
the deal with that?
Okay, so let me look real quick. So I have a drama check in the conversation with Klaasje, and so we've gotten far enough. So I have the conversation with Titus, and I go up to Klaasje, and I'm like, "Look, I now have the whole story. You were with Titus up here alone, and you went downstairs, and he was dead. So what is up?" And then she explains the whole thing to me. Right? She says, we were having sex, and she doesn't say we were having sex. She was saying we were partying, and he died, and I went and got help, basically. And I have a drama check that's legendary that says, "In God's name, wake up." And I get, it's like I said, it's legendary. I start out, I only have a drama of 3. And I get +1s to it because I know it was love that did him in. And she didn't want to talk about the semen sample that I took from the corpse.
You took a semen sample from the corpse.
Yeah, I don't think we or I had toxicology check for it. We could do one thing for toxicology, and we could check either for drugs or for semen. And I opted for semen. I don't remember why I did that.
I don't even remember I don't think I was smart enough to think of this.
To think of toxicology
At all.
Well, because Kim says it's probably not even worth doing it because it's been hanging up here for so long. So, not worth. So I'm assuming that your character is just like, yeah, that makes sense. But anyway, so I was able to do that, and I went for it, and I didn't get it. And so then I went for like this check, and I like leveled up the skill a couple times in the conversation. And it produced... So I find out a couple things here, right? Through the drama of it, I'm basically burrowing down into the like film noir, femme fatale thing. I'm figuring out that part of the reason she's doing this to kind of push all of this away is that this is not her real name.
You find out from a check.
I'm getting that it's not even her actual name. It is like there's multiple layers down, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Did you succeed this volition check?
I don't even remember there being a volition check. And okay. I'm like looking for it. So I don't. Gotcha. Would you remember what it was about?
It was the beguiling check.
So what actually happens with this drama check is I have to pump a bunch of points into it. And it allows me to recognize, this is what drama says. Who, what? Dear God, you've been lied to. She could have killed her lover and lied to everyone. She's not candid at all. She's smoke and mirrors and will-o-wisps. She probably didn't give you a real name either. Why would she? Arrest her immediately before she further entangles you in her web of lies. So maybe the difference between the volition check that you were talking about and the checks that I'm making here is it seems like my successful drama check kind of gets underneath all of that stuff.
Okay.
And so
you basically your knowledge of drama, you can see through the lie.
Exactly. She's playing some sort of dramatic game, and I am too. And so yeah, I immediately turn to Kim, and I say, Kim, why have we not arrested her yet?
Whoa.
And this is, I think, where our games take pretty drastic turns. So how does this whole thing end for you with Klaasje? I mean, are you able to end it since you're kind of bottlenecked here?
So I'm bottlenecked here. So basically, I know that if going down to Titus, my game is now trying to convince Titus. The quest says, hey, you need to convince Titus. Have you explored the Whirling in Rags Hotel? Have you found like a possible murder weapon? Have you analyzed the bullet you found, etc.? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I analyze the bullet with my like hand-eye coordination, and I discover while I'm looking through the area underneath the bookstore that we're going to talk about later. I discover an old rifle in like a hidden room. It's not operational, but the fact that I see it, and it's an old breech loading rifle, which means it's like more powerful and military grade as opposed to the muzzle loaders you see mostly around here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So given that I found that rifle and I like analyzed the bullet, and I'm like, oh, it was fired out of this rifle. Not this specific rifle, because this rifle's like inoperable, but from this model rifle. And I'm like, okay, so I've got a little bit more information there. I've got the rifle to show that the rifle doesn't show, oh, this is the murder weapon. It shows, hey, there are caches of these, pre-war rifles hidden around Martinez. They're easily available. Also, here's the bullet. Also, and then another thing I do is I discover like the hidden passageway behind the Whirling in Rags. And I discover that by finding a key just outside the window where the Union people meet. And that is the door, and that is like the key to the door from the kitchen. And there is a passageway that goes up. There's like some old pinball machines back there, because it used to be like an old pinball place. There's a passageway that goes up in a little dumbwaiter. And it leads to Klaasje's patio. And just before the door that leads to the patio that is barred from the inside, there is a peephole that you can view directly to Klaasje's bed. So it is with like this constellation of evidence, the availability of the murder weapon, the hidden passageway behind the Whirling in Rags, inside the Whirling in Rags, that lead directly to the patio. The fact that I did a visual calculus on the pane of glass and saw that there were like easy shooting angles from the patio. It would have been dark. The patio itself would have been dark. It would have been bright inside. It would have been very easy to make the shot. And the fact that Ruby was the one that suggested, hey, let's act like we hang this person. That gives, if Ruby had been the one to shoot Lely, that would have given Ruby like some motive to cover it up. And it was all of those things plus a pair of glasses that increase my logic, plus smoking a cigarette to increase my intelligence, plus spending 1 point in logic after I failed, that I was able to convince Titus Hardy to like tell me more about Ruby. So my like story with Klaasje is done. Like I haven't like figured out anything more from her. I haven't like gotten more information about Ruby from her, but I was able to talk to Titus and like have him give me like more information about Ruby and land on where she went. That's where I am. It seems like you have a very different situation.
Yeah. So I have none of these passages or anything like that. Got none of that.
Okay.
When I did the visual calculus, I came to basically the exact same conclusion. I'm going to talk about this before I talk about Klaasje. I basically did the exact same thing, in the sense of like, everything points to, 80+% points to someone being on the patio and shooting inside. And then visual calculus gave me the ability to say, hey, what if there are other shooting positions? And my visual calculus is like, yeah, that's pretty unlikely, but here are some other places. And so I had to get a map of the area, which I got from the bookstore, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But I get the map and I come back here, and then basically visual calculus runs through 3 different positions that have sight lines to this window. There's one at a place called Land's End. There's one on an islet a little bit to the north of the fishing village that's across the canal that we can't get to yet. And then there is one on the boardwalk that's also over there.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, you can see into this window from all those positions. And, my visual calculus is running through and saying, like, oh, this is like a 2% shot. This is like a 4% shot, right? So very, very unlikely. But that's as far as I've gotten as far as, like, solving where the shot came from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about these secret passages. So it's basically someone was either standing out here and could have shot inside, or it's from somewhere way off, and that's as far as I've gotten.
But it seems like your question to Kim, which is why haven't we arrested her yet, is not the implication that it sounds...
No. Has nothing to do with that.
Well, I know, but is not the question doesn't that kind of imply that you suspect Klaasje?
Well, so this is why. This is how it comes up. When I'm having a conversation with Klaasje, I have determined already, right, through drama and through some thinking and talking, I've determined that, she's already told me she's on the run from the moral intern, and Titus has told me that too, that she's involved in this some way. She's a flight risk, basically. That she is intimately involved with this crime. It is only through the kind of constraints of genre that I haven't even considered her as being, someone who did the murder yet. And so this is like the opening of the door to think about, what do I need to do to keep her from running away?
Mm.
And so this conversation kind of goes, and, I find out her name is not Klaasje, and she gives me another name. And then I kind of determined that that's not a real name either. She tells me that, she's on the run from the moral intern. She gives me a little bit of information about that. She tells me where her passport and documents are, that they're hidden under a buoy over near the boardwalk. And she explains that she thinks, this is how I learned, that she thinks that Ruby might have killed Laylee. And the reason for that is that Ruby was attracted to Klaasje. And maybe we get the implication that maybe Ruby thought there was a relationship there, and that Klaasje was purposefully kind of leading her on.
Mm.
The reason that she was leading her on is she says Ruby was the leader of the Hardy Boys.
Mm.
Not Titus. She says, like, Titus is, Titus Hardy is, like, ostensibly the leader, but the brains of the operation, the person who made stuff go, stuff like that was all Ruby. Is what she says. And so then as this is kind of going, right, I'm like doing my cop thoughts, right? And I'm repeatedly kind of coming to the conclusion that it might be a good idea to keep her from running away. Because this is what she does.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, she's on the run from the moral intern. The moral intern, if people don't remember, is kind of...
It's like the the World Bank. Or
yeah, it's like the IMF and the EU kind of crammed into one, and NATO kind of all crammed into one, right? So it's this, pseudo-occupational force that like backs currency and gives authority to certain things. So like the RCM is theoretically given authority by the moral intern.
And we're basically, here in Revachol, we are living under like almost a provisional government in perpetuity, and our ward is the moral intern.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And she was engaged with like corporate espionage, which explains why the financial cops are after her.
She's involved in something. She says basically she was involved in a mission that went wrong, and that it ultimately wasn't her fault, but she'll get killed for it.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, if you take me in, if my name is entered into the moral intern system,
The
database that you plug into, I will be killed. And I say, well, look, I don't know what to tell you. I'm just doing my job.
Damn.
And I arrested her.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, she says her name is Katarzyna Alessia. And like I start doing all this encyclopedic thought that's like, actually, this is not even a name from Aranye, this is a name from Grodd. And so like I start doing this all kinds of stuff, all of this like thought about what she's really doing. So I mean,
you are a racist RoboCop.
Well, yeah, kind of, right? In the sense of it's like, I know everything about everyone's nationality. It matters a whole lot to me. And it matters a lot to, like if you lie, I will not, I'm the judge from Blood Meridian. But yeah. And so I arrested her for misrepresentation of, No. I arrested her under suspicion of murder. And that's in her last ditch effort. That's why she says Ruby probably did it. And I said, we don't really know. No way of knowing. You have no proof. And so Kim arrests Klaasje, and he's gone the rest of the day.
Because he's got to transport her to the precinct.
Yeah, exactly.
Damn.
Yeah, and so I don't have Kim the rest of the day, which is interesting. And Titus Hardy, I think whatever the check that you're having to make with him, I don't have to make that because he watches her get marched out. And that has had some effect on the way that he interacts with me.
Wow. And so you're able to talk to Titus and like he gives you information about Ruby?
He gives me a little bit more information about Ruby, yeah. I don't think a whole lot or anything like that.
Kind of says, she probably went to ground over on the coast.
He doesn't tell me that, actually.
Oh.
But he does say, like, she probably went to ground. She's hiding. We legitimately don't know where she is, that kind of thing.
Wow.
I have this Inland Empire thing, the conversation with myself. I get to have this conversation where I'm like, I know I'm right. I know I was right to arrest her. In Inland Empire, right, which is this, like, it's the film noir instinct, right, that, like, something is hiding behind the curtains of reality, right? And then I'm like, well, what was involved with communism here? Communism killed this guy. What did this have to do with communism? And Inland Empire's like, you don't know. You have no idea. And then I'm like, it killed him. It must have. And he's like, no, communism is innocent in this.
Wow.
Implying that love really did do him in.
Interesting.
Yeah. But within that, within the visual calculus, all that kind of stuff, the other thing to add is that while they're having sex, Laylee is sitting there he's not sitting there. He's having sex and he is on top, presumably, and he opens up his mouth. And when he opens his mouth, the bullet comes through the shattered window that you talked about and kills him. And then they kind of figure out how to cover it up.
Yeah, that seems to be the implication. So we're more or less in the same area in terms of the investigation. The only difference is I lack the psyche or intellect to be able to make the connection to be like, I should have Klaasje arrested.
Yeah.
I'm just like a hopeless cop that is like, okay, well, you've told a story. You were right there when a guy died from a gunshot wound to the mouth.
And yeah, and I think that I get a little bit, maybe I didn't get a bonus to it, but I'd been primed a little bit for that because she'd already lied a couple times about different things. So she, for example, said, we were both high and I was just drunk and he was like super high. And then he died. But then Titus had told me she ran down the stairs.
And looked strung out and looked like really high.
Exactly. She looked like she was on speed. And so I was able to be like, well, but you said blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, well, I did one of his lines, obviously, to even out. And so there's the game gives you the bones to be like, she's lying very regularly about things in this crime that don't seem to matter one way or the other. What else is she keeping? So, on some level, I'm arresting her just to see what happens here. And I'm role playing this like, hyper cop, by the book kind of guy. So on some level, that's just, me role playing this character to the best of my ability. But on the other hand, it seems like the game is giving you all the bones to not, to really kind of think about what is the truth here, what's being told, that kind of thing.
This really explains our very different experiences because you cracked this in the conversation with Klaasje, and I had to feel like I had to go on a scavenger hunt to get little bibs and bobs, like tiny little piecemeal bonuses to one logic check in order to convince Titus. I had to gather a bunch of evidence and do some exploring so that I can present him like a cogent theory as to why Ruby would be a suspect. But it also means that in my game universe, Ruby is more of a suspect than in yours.
Yes. For me, it's like pure intuition and like picking up on cues and then finding the evidence, right? If you're talking about, two kinds of evidence gathering here being displayed. One is like the evidence of the lawyer, right? Which is like all these pieces of discourse and figuring out how they all fit together and then figuring out what gets you underneath those things to find like the agreed upon material reality truth, right? Whereas for you, it's like you are going out into the material of the world and trying to like hammer all this shit together to create a case. In some ways, you're a little bit more of like the gumshoe,
Columbo.
Exactly, you're Columboing it up, and I'm just like freewheeling, kind of coming to these conclusions.
You are the Holmes.
Yes,
much more Holmesian energy over there. Yeah, no, I wonder if this is going to have some maybe implications down the road. I don't know how this is going to pan out, but so that's kind of where the main story drops off, because to be honest, you cannot advance this main story any further until the third day, and we're still on the second day. Because the kind of half of the map of this game is locked behind a canal. And basically the canal, like the little canal bridge is not granting access to this other kind of half of the map, these islands. So we just have to, we're going to have to put a pin in the main quest for now. So we decided to do a little side quest.
Oh, and one thing to add to that. You are explicitly now on the hunt for Ruby, who has gone to ground somewhere in the other part of this city that you can't get to. Like, that's your like immediate main goal.
Yes, and the Hardy Boys, after I like showed them all of this stuff, they have like more or less internally turned on her. They're like after I presented all the evidence, like all the Hardy Boys are like, damn, she did it, didn't she?
Yeah, so I'm not in that spot. I'm still like, I'm pretty sure that they were murdered. I'm pretty sure Klaasje is involved in some way, in the sense of like her actions in the world have led Laylee to be killed, perhaps, because it 80% came from this roof, right? But I really don't know who did it. I mean, Ruby's a good suspect, but I really don't know who did it. I don't really know with what weapon they did it, because I haven't seen the bullet. I don't really know, like what the circumstances were that would allow that to happen. Maybe but
you've got motive.
I have motive, right? And that's why Ruby's like the best suspect so far. But it feels like you have a bunch of data points to be like, Ruby is the person I'm looking for.
Yeah,
and I really just have a location, like as far as hard evidence is concerned.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely different. We're going to have to see how that plays out. Did you talk to anybody else? Any other incidental stuff? I had a thought cabinet thing mature after talking to the mega rich lightbending guy.
What matured?
It's a thought about bankruptcy.
Okay.
And every time I fail a white check, I get a real. Because it's like the ultimate success. Capitalism's the ultimate like success fail ideology, right? It's like you got to pick yourself up and try again. So every time I fail a white check, I get a little bit of money.
No, I didn't. My nationalistic thoughts finally matured, but it hasn't really come up yet.
So not monarchist, but nationalist, right?
Nationalists. Welcome to Revachol.
Gotcha.
That kind of, the racist lorry driver, that kind of.
I wonder if you like talk to Renee, the old, royalist soldier, if you could get some monarchist going.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Oh, so you haven't talked to Renee?
No.
Okay.
I'm doing cop shit, man. I don't have time.
Doing cop shit. Yeah, we'll talk about him probably later. I don't know. Did you pick up some flowers on Klaasje's balcony?
No.
Oh, interesting. So when you're talking to Klaasje, you can notice there's this little white flower on her balcony, and the wind picks it up, and with my hand-eye coordination, I'm able to like grab it before it flies away. And I talked to Kim about it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, those are They're called bells, right? Victory bells. And he says that they were something that the communists, I think, wore on their left side before they were going out to fight in the revolution.
Oh, it's the poppy.
Yeah.
Got it.
But he said, actually, it's a misnomer to think it's purely a communist symbol because actually both sides were it. And it was much less about a symbol of what ideology you represented. It was more of a little ritual to do with, like, the men were given these by, significant others, by the girls before they got on the train as, as like a good luck token. And both sides actually used it, but maybe on different sides of the jacket. And I ask, hey, what time do these blossom? And he's like, this is too early for these to blossom. Actually, these are like we're a couple months out. It's still winter, right? And I was able to talk to this war vet who's playing Bool, like a little game with some heavy metal balls out near like a crater in front of the Whirling in Rags Hotel. And he confirmed this. Like he was a monarchist, and he's actually like a war hero, basically.
Jeez.
Yeah, he
like 100 years old.
Yeah, he's like an old dude. But during the revolution, he fought against the communists, and he actually was awarded the like two of the highest honors of the kind of the king because he saved this like princeling or duke's son, like some like snob who he hated because this person was like effete and not masculine enough for him, right? And also just had no business being out on the battlefield, in his words. This guy's jaw got crushed by a horse after he got shot off of his horse. And Renee dragged him like over the course of 2 days, 7 kilometers, with them both, with like Renee's knee shattered. And on the way to like dragging this guy to get picked up by the cavalry, Renee killed 3 communists.
Jeez.
Yeah, so he's like, he is just this like walking war scar, but he confirmed this like the account on the flowers, and he was like, yeah, this is either incredibly unseasonably early, or he was like looking at it and was like, they also look like they could be preserved. So anyway, I haven't been able to figure out what they were doing on Klaasje's balcony just yet, but there they were.
Someone's got a hothouse, or I don't know.
Yeah.
A hyperbaric chamber to prevent age and decay.
Yeah.
But let's. The other thing we did here is we learned a little bit about a thing called the Doomed Commercial District.
Yes, there's a curse.
There's a curse.
There's a specter haunting Martinet.
And it's a doomed commercial building. So you can go into this building that's called, I want to get the name right. It's a bookstore, and there's like a little girl sitting outside, and she's like hawking books at you. And you can go inside, and you find out that the name of the bookstore is Crime, Romance, and Biographies of Famous People.
Yes, the 3 genres.
Yeah. The 3 most famous genres. Or the most sellable genres. And you talk to this woman named Pleasance, and she explains that she's the owner of the bookstore, and I was able to talk to her about like why her child isn't in school and why her child is outside like hawking people books.
Yeah, what angle did you take on that?
I said that was forced labor. And I said that was bad. I mean, I told you I'm a communist or trying to become one. And,
but a nationalist communist.
Yeah, nationalist communist. And so, I was like, yeah, the revolution should have abolished this. This should be, impossible. And she was like, no, it's good. It's good for children to learn the work ethic early on. But yeah, I talked to her quite a bit, and she basically just says, hey, you should walk around, check things out. I'd already been in here one time to get that map. And I go over to these curtains, and they look mysterious to me.
Yeah, they've got a little like a little trinket hanging off of them. Did you see that?
I did not see that.
Yeah, it's like a little, I don't know the word for it, but like a little some kind of token of perhaps magical power.
Some sort of tchotchke.
Sure. But I think when you mess around with the curtains, Pleasance tells you, hey, stop that. No, that's employees only, right?
Yeah.
I ripped those bad boys down. And then she was like, okay, we need to come talk to me because this is serious.
Yeah, I didn't rip them down, but I did like not mess with them. And I walked back to her and talked to her, and yeah, she basically explains, look, there's a curse here. This whole building is the doomed commercial district. Every business that operates here fails. And she explains that she's brought in like all of these people, you know, like Simonese, like occultists. She's brought in. She uses like a bunch of like real racist anthropological language to talk about other people, and my logic kicked in, or no, my rhetoric kicked in, and he was like, I don't think you should talk about people that way. He's like, that seems bad to talk about, to use all these like anthropological terms for human beings. But she just says the reality is that there's something here. There's a I forget the word she uses.
An entity.
She has a specific word though. God, it's like a void wraiths.
Void wraiths. Okay.
Yeah, she tells me that there are void wraiths that cause commercial failure in this building. And my drama allows me to convince her to investigate. I kind of take on the, ghost hunters kind of vibe here. And I'm like, look.
Yeah, I do a little bit with Kim to try to do that, but I fail it. My drama is not high enough. So I was not able to like convince her to hand me over the keys to like get back behind her shop.
Well, so she handed it over to me. Kim's not here, so it's just me freewheeling on my own here. But my drama's high enough that I'm allowed her to do it. I tell her I'm the Void Revenant. That's like what I'm about. I'm a cop, but I'm also the Void Revenant, and so my ability to do this is going to be pretty high. And she says, "Okay, well, if you've got it, here's the key." She gives me a key to go through a back door to access this kind of shopping complex, basically. How do you get back there?
Fucking put my head down, run through that door. I do it once and I like lose a health, but I've got like 9 health. I've got so much health. And then I like crack it real good. And it's like, you're going to have to do this one more time to break the door. And you have a couple of like options, like in terms of what you say, and some are pretty funny. But I pick the one that's like run towards the door and yell, "Fuck my head!" So I smashed down the door.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, what do you learn in here?
It's a bunch of like the remnants of like failed commercial enterprises. So the first thing you go into is like an old gym, like an old boxing gym. You could talk to Kim about this place, and there's a sweet like barbell set up for a clean and snatch, basically, or a deadlift. And I lift that thing like nothing. Kim's like very impressive.
I couldn't. It was like my logic or my visual calculus. No, my conceptualization, I think, was like, yeah, this thing's not even secured correctly. It's a health hazard. It's like,
I saw that, but I just didn't care.
It didn't fall apart or anything on you?
No, I think that if you're too weak and you try it, there's nothing keeping the weights on the ends. Like you don't have the clips on. So I would imagine that if you failed it, like catastrophic failure would occur. Like if you weren't strong enough to keep it level.
Yeah, I didn't bother doing that. There is a game studio.
Yeah, very special game studio. In the bookstore, we saw basically Dungeons and Dragons manuals. Like
Whirl.
Yeah.
Whirl Untethered.
Whirl Untethered. And you go into this place and there's like this big tape deck computer system, right? Hooked up with a bunch of wires. And there are these whiteboards with depictions of these these like little elven creatures called kind of gremlin creatures called those whirls, right?
Oh no, they're called Welkins.
Welkins, yes. And you kind of go through the little illustrations of the Welkins, and then there's like one with a big beard, and it's got like it's indicating, you're like, oh my god, a Welkin supremacist.
Yeah.
And it's like there's like this Welkin plot to like eliminate all non-Welkin beings. So you talk to Kim about it, and Kim like puts it together for me, actually, where he's like, what this is like, instead of having one campaign, like these people were connecting to like a central game master that was running several campaigns concurrently and like coordinating them all, and they would like interact. So they basically made like the lowest lo-fi MMORPG.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this was like the rim, and so you looked into their you could look in their financials and see that like with every time they lost funding, they only got more ambitious. And the sheer amount of the technological cost to keep these lines open and like have them all connect to a central operator just became so great that they failed under they collapsed under their own weight.
This is where not having Kim is it doesn't help you out, right? So I like see all this stuff about whirls, and I was like, and Welkins, and I was like, wow, this is impressive stuff. Like I didn't have any context for it, and I got the idea that they were using telephone conversations to like build a game, but that's all.
Did you find the little filament thing and plug it into the machine?
Yeah, so there's a little filament. You plug it into a machine, and it connects to a thing called the Easton Celendian Repeater Station. And in a world without computation, this is how you password protect things. You like hook a projector up to a telephone or a radio system.
And it goes to an operator.
Yeah. And the operator is like, what's the password?
Yeah.
And she tells me that the company is named Fortress Ardent. And I was like, okay, cool. And she was like, well, what's the password? And I was like, I do not know.
Yep.
And she says, well, when you have that, call me back. So, basically the idea is like, you can learn this later in the game.
Mm-hmm. But
is my impression. I looked around and couldn't find it.
Yeah, I couldn't find the password either. Maybe it escaped me. I might go back and try to figure this out. But that's basically that. And you can kind of keep exploring. There's some creepy mannequins. There's some like remnants of other weird businesses that it won. Just the the Detrius of like consumer locations. And eventually you get to like a little basement with a furnace. Did you find this little furnace that you could yell into?
I think they call it a cellar. Well, you're really kind of burying the lead here because there's a giant refrigerator shaped like a polar bear down here. And boy, was my face red.
I know. That's where you could have shoved the body, huh?
Yeah, immediately. And this is the terrible thing, too. As soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, yeah, this is the thing I missed in my first playthrough, too.
Damn.
I was like, oh, I could have remembered where this fridge was, but I didn't. And so, obviously, I didn't put the body there. And there's that, and there's also apparently like something in... I read a note that explains that there is like another filament or something like that in an ice cream maker, but the ice cream maker requires it's frozen shut, and it requires a
super pry bar.
Yeah, super pry bar. My current pry bar would not work. It was bending under the weight. So the only thing to really do down here, like you're saying, is look at this big furnace and do some stuff to it.
Yeah, you can you hear voices. You hear a voice at least up the furnace, and I just bellow into the furnace after kicking it. I got a bonus to getting the attention of whoever was there because I kicked it. And a voice comes down and is like, "Hey, I'll pull back the curtain for you, so you can get up here." So that's nice. But I do kind of explore the rest of this area. There is a place in kind of the bottom left-hand corner of this room where I saw that like stockpile of old guns.
Yeah, I found the same thing. It says, but I didn't have the bullet, so I don't have that additional kind of context for any of it, and so it literally just says, this is a hidden rifle zone. This is a stockpile from the Revolution, and it did give me like the little factoid that if this is here, then that means there's weapons that could be anywhere, and so we don't even have to be thinking about like specific people who might have access to weapons. Anyone could theoretically have a gun. So it kind of like blows my case out even wider in some ways, although the game's not telling me that.
Now I do disconnect the stuff down here. That you can go to like the electrical, like I guess the box, the equivalent thereof, and you can disconnect the refrigerator, which has just been running for God knows how long. It's this monstrous, really energy inefficient refrigerator that's been running. And I kind of talked to Ken, and he's like, oh, no wonder the businesses here have so much problem. They're running up this electrical bill long after this business has been gone. And I also like unhook the ice cream maker that you can open, which gives you a little bit of a bonus to opening it, but it's just nowhere close to sufficient to overcoming the -20 because you don't have the right tool.
Yeah, I didn't unplug either of them because, one, I didn't know what would happen. There was no Kim there to tell me. And two, the note that I got, there's like a little note you can read about the filament or whatever that's in the ice cream maker, and it said specifically it needs to be refrigerated.
Oh.
And so I was afraid that it would like thaw out and like ruin whatever's in there, so I didn't unplug it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, then after that, I kind of go back up to this curtain that has been removed, like on the floor above. And oh gosh, what was this character's name? Do you have that written down?
Yeah, she is a novelty dice maker, and her name is Neha. Oh, you know what? Things that we were talking about last time about who gets named like a qualifier at the beginning. We were talking about Fat Angus, right?
Yes,
this kind of qualifier. Something that is, I don't think novelty dice maker necessarily is one of those. That seems to be just a profession, novelty dice maker. But outside of the bookstore, there is a woman named Working Class Woman. So, I'm now thinking about that, and so
no, I mean that's probably a good thing to keep your eye on in terms of like the way people are named, because I do think that they're treated in a certain way.
Yep, but her name is Neha, I think.
Yeah, and she's just got this little nook here in what amounts to like the remnants of this chimney. Like this is the smokestack that she has like set up shop in. You can talk to her and ask her about her business. You can ask her a bunch of questions. And I don't know, what do you talk to this person about?
Yeah, I just kind of found out what she was up to, and her window overlooks the courtyard where the body was hanging. So I asked her about the night that it happened, and she's like, "Look, if it's lit up in here, it's completely dark out there. There's no lights, so I didn't see anything." And she says that she's always wearing her headphones, listening to basically like shortwave radio broadcasts that people are making. She says mostly it's just people teaching you how to curse in different languages. But, it's some music and chatter and things like that. So she didn't really hear anything. She watched, the Kuno throw stones at it for days. And, that's kind of it. We talk about novelty dice, but as far as like big game stuff, she really doesn't.
She'll give you some background on the various businesses that came and went. Talk about like the polar bear thing. Talk about the nerds doing the MMORPG. She has a particular take on when you bring up the doomed commercial district with her, she's very dismissive because she used to be a jewelry maker and she obviously had like a really bad experience with it. I get a visceral reaction from her, and my gut tells me that she had like a bad experience with like other jewelers in the profession. But she ran her first shop, which was a jewelry business that was maybe her parents helped her out on it, into the ground. So she has a very, she has like this attitude of like, I I tried my hand in business and I failed, but I like kept trying and I found my niche. And now I'm not rolling in dough right now, but I'm doing just fine. So all these other businesses, she like explains why they failed. So she does not buy any kind of supernatural explanation for the Doomed Commercial District at all.
No, not at all. And she's been doing the dice thing for like 10 years or something, a long time. And yeah, so she's a little bit like bullish on. Well, I guess what's interesting about it is that she's like, yeah, they just failed because of the things that make businesses fail, and she kind of tells you for every one of those businesses why that happens. And what's interesting about that too is that she is ultimately not like a defender of capitalism. She says that because when I bring it up, I'm like, well, look, I got this lady out here who believes that they're void wraiths. Like, what am I supposed to tell her? And she was like, well, maybe the curse was capitalism. Did you ever think about that? And so she's, a little bit, I don't think she's like, these businesses failed and that's a good thing. She's like, these businesses fail because businesses fail. That's part of the system, and the system is unfair. And that's just how it is. She's a little bit of like a economic realist about it, I guess.
Yeah, I tell her, I kind of ask her more questions, and she drops that the whirling in rags is actually a part of the Doomed Commercial District. Like, it was built at the same time as like a part of the same complex, and that's one of the reasons why it's actually on the call box across the street.
Oh my God.
Did you get that?
No, I didn't realize that it was on the little call box thing.
Yeah, so I talked to her about that, and so like that's one thing I put in my mind is, oh, well, like the whirling in rags, seems to be doing fine. So, maybe this idea of like the Doomed Commercial District, dooms you forever isn't that great. But then I realized, oh my God, the reason why her business has been successful is she's technically not in the building. She's in the chimney. And I tell her that. I'm like, look, I think I understand. I had this big thing, and I was like, I know why you aren't you aren't in ruins. I know why you've been successful. And she's like, why? How about you tell me why? And I was like, you're in the chimney. You're not in the building. And she just kind of completely dismisses me with that idea. Now, I did click on every button at the call box downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one business in particular that I called and had a deeply strange experience. I called like this business was Slipstream, and a woman answers, and she recognizes my voice, and she like starts calling me a name that is not Harry, and she starts crying, and eventually I hang up, and I ask Neha about it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, that's impossible. That business, went under and was bought out over 100 years ago.
Yeah, they were making helicopter blades and then pivoted to making skis.
Yes. I had physical instruments interjected in me. Like, there's a moment where you realize, ooh, you could make a sword out of that, but then you realize it would take too much time. But anyway, she's like, that's impossible. You couldn't have, you just got pranked. And it's just it just is left in the air there that it is possible that I called like someone from the past.
The void.
Yeah. there's some kind of something bad at work here. So I went back to Plaisance, something like that.
Pleasance, I think. I don't really know. Well, just one thing that I want to say. Because I also read about all these businesses. The one that I like the most is when she's talking about the game company, and she says, just as the money started to run out, they began to really complain about capitalism and how hard it was to break into the industry. I thought that was very funny.
Yeah,
a little bit of maybe making fun of themselves as a game development company, but yes, you went back and talked to Pleasance.
Yeah, and I told her, hey, I want you to know about this Doomed Commercial District. It doesn't make sense. There are just inconsistencies that we've been told about. And she said, like what? And I really messed up. And I said, well, there's this dice maker up there, and she's doing fine. So It can't be that bad, right? And she's like, you idiot. She is the one siphoning off all the psychic energy. She's the cause of the curse. You idiot. And that's it. That's how the quest ends for me.
Oh. I was able to have like all kinds of other conversations with her.
Yeah, my quest completes there and it's like done.
Yeah, I was able to kind of keep that going. I was like, no. I was like, it's probably capitalism. And she's like, it cannot be capitalism. Are you telling me that a whole economic system is cursed? And I could be like, yeah. Yeah, basically. She's like, no, that's fake. And then we kind of talk about her business ideas. And she was like, yeah, initially I wanted to open up a store that wasn't a bookstore that just sold like esoteric items to protect people from bad energy. But my husband didn't think that would be a very good business idea, so I opened up a bookstore instead. And in here, my quest ends too. But she basically, my logic, maybe one of my, blue skills, I think. Basically, in the middle of this end of the quest was like, yeah, she believes this so strongly that you are not going to be able to convince her of anything.
Oh, that's why. So I got that too.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Huh. What? So this is our first side quest, true and proper, in this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you put this? How do you rate this experience? This, a lot of games have a real hard distinction between the way main quests feel versus the way side quests feel. Certainly, this felt different. What do you think about the way it worked?
Well, I think what's interesting kind of on an affective level about this game is that I think a lot of people talk about how cool it is that things connect together. I think that is a big deal. And how interesting it is that it hits all these different tones. So it's very funny, and I think a lot of the things we were just talking about in this quest are very funny, but also serious and kind of melancholic. Think about a lot of the stuff that I learned about Klaasje and her history and how getting kind of kicked around the world. Think about the kind of melancholy of Layli and his war wounds and how all that kind of stuff works. Right, It hits a lot of different registers. What's interesting to me is that this is a side quest that's almost entirely funny. And I think that the way that we've been playing this game is not the way that you would naturally play it, in the sense that I don't think you would be mainlining the main quest and then kind of doing side content on the side. I think a lot of this kind of naturally flows together as you're discovering things and kind of walking around and talking to people and maybe getting bottlenecked and having to get, experience points. And so what's interesting to me is that I think the way that we've been playing it, it seems to have very distinct and different registers. But if you're playing it kind of naturally,
it all blends together in a melange.
Exactly. And I think that's interesting.
No, I think you're right in terms of the way we're playing it. I do think the most people, when they get out with Kim, they probably see the corpse, and a lot of people, if they fail that fortitude check and they're like, hey, you need to just get your shit together, they're probably going out across the street and going in that bookstore, right?
Yeah.
I imagine if you had a heat map of activity after that failed check, a large percentage of players go in the bookstore. I think that when you play it in kind of an organic way where you just kind of wander around, you probably, maybe you don't even do the quest, but you just get the hook for the quest, and you kind of I think that there's kind of a lot of modern instincts that RPG players have played, whether you're playing Skyrim or whatever, where you're like, okay, I'm going to survey an area, start a bunch of quests, and then once I have them, I can kind of budget my time and kind of have a couple of goals and maybe go work in this area because I think that there's some efficiencies with these quests. There's a lot of efficiency-minded players that have been kind of carved out of folks that play these games regularly.
Yeah, it only takes one or two quests where you realize you got to go to the same place 2 times in a row.
Yeah.
When you could have done those quests at the same time, to make you really start thinking okay, I want to talk to everybody that's got a big old yellow, exclamation point over their head. I'm going to figure out what they're up to. So yeah, I mean, I think that this runs against, if this game is referencing obviously Planescape Torment and that kind of milieu of games. If you are the kind of RPG player that did not play those CRPGs, then I think the kind of naturalistic design of this game is like fresh and new and cool. And so you're going to experiment in that zone.
Did you get any things from the thought cabinet from the dice maker?
Nope.
I did ask for some die.
Oh, I did. I also asked for some die.
What kind of die you get?
I said, why don't you just whip it up? Because you can have all kinds of things. You can say, I want the most special die you have. I want
a cursed die.
Yeah, right. So you can have all these qualifiers. And I said, you know what? I just want your, you pick for me. And so she pulls out 2 dice. It's like 2 D20s, I think. And one is red and one is blue. And like immediately, my brain is like, oh yeah, cops, right? And she was like, yeah, it's a little obvious, but I think it's appropriate. These are for you. And she tosses them to me. And my logic comes up and it says, she's going to toss them to you. Or maybe she's preparing to do it. And my logic is like, she's going to toss them to you. Do not overthink it. And I get a check that's like hand-eye coordination. And it's like, catch them. And it's like a medium check or whatever. But it says like -1, definitely overthinking it.
Yeah.
And so I like try to grab them and I only catch one. Or no, actually, I don't even think I catch them. And one just goes right down the hole.
Damn.
Yeah, and so I only get one. And she's like, look, they were a set, so they don't really work. Sorry.
Damn.
Like they would work conceptual if you had both, but you don't have both, so.
I did the same thing. She threw me the cop dice, and I did catch them. And good. I got a cool little thing in my thought cabinet, either talking about the dice that I had or like the games that they're played with, the role-playing games. And it's basically a thought cabinet about like the possibility of failure. And it's wild. And I've like immediately started internalizing it. And for the next 4 hours, I automatically fail every red check.
Whew.
It's high. I don't know. I hope that this is going to pan out. I just hope I can dodge like a important red check. For the remainder of the next 4 hours, I might read a book or something.
Just chill out.
Just chill out, because I wanted to do a little quest with Kuno, but I can't because of this thought cabinet thing. I really didn't think it out.
And we don't know what the like solution is.
No, I don't know. I have not spoiled it, so I do not know like how it resolves.
I'm going to look right now. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Do you remember the name of it?
Something possibility maybe.
Okay. Accept all thoughts. One moment. I'm looking. Okay.
The Precarious World is what it was called. I looked at my footage here.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay, that sounded like a good one.
It's interesting at least.
Okay.
Is what I'll say.
All right. Hopefully worth having to dodge a red check for the next 4 hours game time. No, I think that what you've said is kind of interesting about like how, but you can apply that lesson, like the idea of like the way we are tackling the game really affecting the experience. I think it can be applied with all these Baldur's Gate games, right? With all like isometric RPGs. It might affect this one maybe a little bit because of like the varying emotional tenors of main quest versus side quest, but also, I mean, the main quest in like Baldur's Gate 1 was relatively serious and have a lot of levity, and like the tonal difference in some of the side quests is like really silly, right? Yeah, so maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they are. I guess the difference here, right, is that there's a lot of thought that goes into the design of the width of approach in this game,
Mm-hmm.
whereas there's very little thought that goes into the design of the width of approach in these other isometric RPGs.
Yeah. No,
Meaning that like if the two of us go into a dialogue conversation in this game, what we get out of it's going to be radically different. If I approach a combat encounter as a wizard and you approach it as a barbarian in Baldur's Gate, what we get out of it's not radically different.
the process is different and the outcome is identical.
Exactly, right.
Unless you're Ticklevar and then the outcome just takes you, 20 to 30 times longer.
That's true, but the process was the same. It just had to be repeated many times.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, fun. So, like, what's the next thing you're thinking about doing? We got the rest of this day to burn. I don't know if you've done anything else after this.
I was looking at our little list, and I don't know. I guess we just have to do some quests.
It's like some little side quests, maybe, because we've got like half a day or so to burn, right?
Yeah. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But it'll be something for sure.
Yeah, we'll figure out something to do. We'll probably have to chat about it in kind of the interim, but this will be just maybe a little bit shorter of an episode because of the way there's just this bottleneck in the game that with day 3, like you're kind of just stuck in this half of the area and you can't advance the main plot until the bridge is operable.
This actually happened to me. I think this is part of the structure of the game. Something that's been actually announced since the last time we recorded one of these episodes is that there's a new version of this game coming out.
Oh, really?
The final cut, yeah, which is, unfortunate for us, I guess. And I think it will probably come out in the middle of this recording. The two, or in the middle of this being posted. The two things that are interesting about it, or the kind of big things, is one, it is creating voice acting for every line of dialogue, I believe, in the game. I actually don't think that's a good idea. I strongly disagree with that as a choice. I do not think that will improve the game. I think that would actually make me, having to listen to all the lines of dialogue in this game, I think would make me like it less, just to be frank. But the other side of it too is that there are going to be more side quests, and I think that, and maybe more to the main quest too. I'm actually not sure, but I think part of the reason for adding more side quests is that what has happened to us here is exactly what happened to me the first time I played the game, which is about midday, day 2, I had completed literally everything that could be completed in this first part of the game.
Yeah.
And I just had to figure out literally ways to move the clock. And that really took kind of running around. So in some ways, when you're at this point in the game, it really doesn't feel, at least when I played the game for the first time, it didn't feel like I was able to like role play appropriately or whatever, because I didn't think that my character would be going down like all of these routes and roads of quest lines, because that's not what they were interested in. And yet I had to do them to move the clock forward. So... and there might be ways. I mean, can you just like go to sleep or something, or read a book? Or are there ways to just move the clock?
If you don't have Kim with you, you can sit on a park bench. There's a park bench outside the Whirling in Rags, and you just sit on it.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll see if I can get some drugs off the more drugs. I did get some speed from Klaasje's medicine cabinet.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that last episode, because I had the option to get it, and I said, no, I do not want it.
I took it, and then I like shook it in front of her and be like, I see you've got this. I'm going to take some. And she's like, you're stealing. That's bad. And Kim actually had my back, and he was like, technically, it's just confiscating.
Kim's got a real laissez-faire attitude toward confiscation and using it based on those, tires or rims that you got from him.
Yeah, I think Kim's really showing us like what the limits are to the idea of the good cop, right? Like where the moral limits of that concept like are defined, right?
Yep.
Because you're still just taking people's stuff willy-nilly, left and right. Yeah, well, maybe we'll find some conversations we can get into. Maybe we'll both end up trying to do this Kuno quest after my red checks go. You might end up having to trying to talk with Renee. That might be fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we still got a couple people. We'll figure it out. Awesome. Well, any last messages you want to impart on the viewer listeners?
Oh, you can go to rangetouch.com to see all the other things we do. And if you like the show and you want to support it, you can go to patreon.com/rangetouch. The links to both of those things are down in the description below this episode. If you are watching this on YouTube and you'd rather hear it as a podcast, there's a link to that as well. That's all I've got. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode.
Ciao, everybody.